The lunch rush at Milano's was in full swing when my brother Marcus decided to make his announcement. I was expediting orders in the kitchen, ensuring each plate met our standards before heading to the dining room. The familiar sounds of sizzling pans, chopping knives, and busy conversation filled the space I'd grown to love over the past 3 years. Marcus had been the general manager for 8 months, ever since our parents convinced me to give him a chance to prove himself in the family business. What they didn't know was that Milano's wasn't the family business they assumed it was. When I bought the struggling restaurant through my LLC, Riverside Holdings, I'd kept the ownership structure quiet. My family saw me as the computer girl, who somehow talked her way into a restaurant job, not someone capable of running a successful business. Sarah. Marcus's voice cut through the kitchen noise. Front and center. Now. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked to the pass window. The dining room was packed with our usual Tuesday crowd: business people, families, regulars who'd become part of our extended community. Marcus stood in the center of it all, his chest puffed out like he was about to deliver a state address. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced loudly enough for the entire restaurant to hear, "I need to address a staffing issue that's been affecting your dining experience." My stomach dropped. Whatever was coming, it wasn't going to be good. "This is my sister Sarah," he continued, gesturing toward me with theatrical flair. "She's been working here as a line cook, but frankly she's not meeting our standards. The family charity program ends today." The dining room fell silent. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the kitchen staff behind me had gone quiet, everyone sensing the shift in atmosphere. "Marcus," I said quietly, "maybe we should discuss this privately." "No, I think transparency is important," he replied, his voice carrying that particular tone he'd perfected since childhood, the one that meant he was enjoying having power over me. "See, Sarah here has always been the family disappointment. Never could hold down a real job, so our parents asked me to help her out. But I'm running a business, not a charity." Mrs. Chin, one of our regular customers who came in every Tuesday with her book club, looked uncomfortable. The business lunch table in corner booth 6 had stopped their meeting entirely to stare. This was exactly the kind of scene that could damage Milano's reputation permanently. "You see," Marcus continued, warming to his audience, "Sarah thinks she understands the restaurant business because she can follow recipes. But management, strategy, customer service excellence? That requires real skills, real education, real experience. Things she's never had." He'd been building toward this moment for months. Every staff meeting where he'd dismiss my suggestions. Every time he'd introduce himself to vendors as the owner's son. Every decision he'd made without consultation, assuming his title as general manager meant he had ultimate authority. "So effective immediately," Marcus announced, pulling a termination letter from his pocket. "Sarah's employment here is terminated. We'll be hiring a qualified line cook who can actually contribute to our success." The dining room remained frozen. Our head server Miguel looked stricken. He'd been with me since day one, knew the real story, but understood why we kept the ownership structure quiet. Our family dynamics were complicated enough without adding business ownership to the mix. "You can't be serious," I said, though part of me wasn't surprised. Marcus had always been the golden child, the one with the business degree and the confident handshake. When our parents talked about success, they meant people like Marcus, loud, ambitious, quick to take credit. "Dead serious," he replied, extending the termination letter. "Pack your things and turn in your apron. Security will escort you out if necessary." I looked around the dining room at faces I'd come to know over 3 years. Mrs. Chen's book club, who always ordered our special pasta and left generous tips. The young couple in booth 2 who'd had their first date here and came back every month to celebrate their anniversary. The construction crew from the site across the street who trusted us with their limited lunch break time. These people weren't just customers to me. They were the reason I'd worked 16-hour days to turn Milano's from a failing restaurant with a 1-star Yelp rating into the neighborhood gem it had become. They were why I'd personally interviewed every staff member, why I'd spent months perfecting our menu, why I'd invested not just money but my heart into making this place something special. "Fine," I said quietly, untying my apron. "I'll pack my things." Marcus smirked, clearly pleased with himself. "Smart choice. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I walked back to the kitchen, past the prep stations I'd designed, past the equipment I'd carefully selected, past the staff schedule I'd spent hours optimizing to ensure everyone got fair hours and decent pay. My personal knife set went into my bag along with the few belongings I kept in the office. Miguel appeared at my elbow. "Sir, this is crazy. You can't just let him." "It's okay," I said, though it definitely wasn't okay. Sometimes people need to learn things the hard way. As I gathered my things, I could hear Marcus in the dining room, already spinning the narrative to our customers. "Sometimes you have to make tough decisions to maintain quality. We'll have a new qualified chef by tomorrow." The kitchen staff watched me with confusion and anger. They knew who really ran this place, who approved their schedules, who fought for their raises, who stayed late to cover shifts when they had emergencies. But they also knew that speaking up could cost them their jobs, and most of them had families to support. I slung my bag over my shoulder and walked through the dining room one last time. The customers watched with uncomfortable expressions, sensing they'd witnessed something that didn't quite add up. Marcus stood near the register, arms crossed, looking satisfied with his public display of authority. "Good luck with everything," I said to him as I passed. "Won't need it," he replied. "Finally going to run this place properly." I pushed through the front door into the afternoon sunlight, my 3 years at Milano's officially over. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been fired from my own restaurant by someone who genuinely believed he had the authority to do it. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. Unknown number. "Hello. Ms. Rodriguez? This is Jennifer Walsh from First National Business Banking. I'm calling because we received some unusual activity alerts on your Milano's restaurant account. It appears someone attempted to access your business credit line without proper authorization. Also, one of your employees called claiming to be the owner and demanding access to your operational accounts. I wanted to verify this with you directly since you're listed as the sole account holder and business owner." I sat in my car watching through Milano's front windows as Marcus gestured animatedly to the remaining customers, probably explaining how much better things would be now. "That's very interesting," I said. "What exactly did this employee claim?" "He said he was Marcus Rodriguez, the owner, and that he needed to terminate your access to the accounts since you were no longer employed. He also requested immediate access to today's receipts and demanded we reverse your recent equipment purchases. When we asked for proper documentation, he became quite agitated." Through the window I could see Marcus on his phone, his confident expression shifting to confusion, then frustration. "Ms. Rodriguez? Are you there?" "Yes, I'm here. And no, Marcus Rodriguez is not the owner. He's the general manager, though as of today that may be changing. Could you send someone to the restaurant? I think there are some ownership clarifications that need to be made in person." "Absolutely. Our business relationship manager can be there within 30 minutes. We take unauthorized access attempts very seriously, especially when someone claims to own an account they don't have legal rights to." I hung up and sat in my car for a moment watching the restaurant I'd built from the ground up. 3 years ago, Milano's had been a failing dive with health code violations and a reputation for terrible food. I'd bought it for a fraction of its assessed value, spending months renovating, hiring the right staff, perfecting recipes, and building relationships with our community. My family never understood how I'd managed to talk my way into a restaurant job. They assumed I was just lucky that someone took pity on the family disappointment and gave me a chance. The reality that I'd identified an undervalued business opportunity, secured financing, navigated licensing requirements, and turned it into a profitable enterprise didn't fit their narrative of who I was supposed to be. Marcus had always been the successful one, the one with the MBA and the corporate job. When he got laid off 6 months ago, our parents pressured me to help him out. "Give your brother a chance," they'd said. "He has real business experience. He could probably teach you a lot about running a restaurant properly." So I'd hired him as general manager, hoping that family loyalty would outweigh my reservations. For the first few months it had worked reasonably well. Marcus brought energy and ambition, and some of his corporate experience did translate to restaurant operations. But gradually his attitude shifted from gratitude to entitlement, from collaboration to control. He started introducing himself to vendors as the owner's son. He began making unilateral decisions about staffing and menu changes. He talked about his vision for the restaurant's future, as if I were just a temporary obstacle to his grand plans. And increasingly he treated me not as his employer, but as a subordinate who needed constant management and correction. My phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. He's freaking out. Bank called and he's screaming at everyone. What's happening? I typed back, don't worry. Everything's going to be fine. Just keep the kitchen running. 25 minutes later, a professional-looking woman in a navy suit entered Milano's. Through the front windows, I watched her approach Marcus, who was standing near the register looking increasingly agitated. She presented her business card and asked to speak with him privately. I could see Marcus's body language shift from confident to defensive to confused. His gestures became more animated, his voice louder, though I couldn't make out the words from my car. Other customers began glancing toward their conversation with obvious discomfort. The woman remained calm and professional, occasionally referring to a tablet in her hands. She was clearly explaining something that Marcus didn't want to hear, based on his increasingly frantic responses. My phone rang again. Marcus's number. Sarah, you need to get back here right now. His voice was tight with panic. There's some woman here from the bank making crazy accusations about ownership. She's saying you own Milano's, which is obviously impossible. You need to come back and clear this up. I'm sorry, but I don't work there anymore, I replied calmly. You fired me, remember? In front of the entire lunch rush. This isn't a joke. She's saying she's going to freeze the accounts until she can verify ownership with you. She's talking about calling corporate headquarters and legal departments. This could shut down the restaurant. Through the window I could see the banking representative talking to Miguel now, who was nodding and pointing toward the kitchen. Several customers had left money on their tables and were heading for the door, clearly uncomfortable with the drama unfolding in what was supposed to be their peaceful lunch spot. That does sound serious, I said. Maybe you should have thought about that before publicly humiliating me in front of our customers. Our customers? Sir, you're a line cook. You don't have customers. Actually, Marcus, I think you're about to learn something interesting about that. I hung up and got out of my car. Time to handle this properly. When I walked back into Milano's, the banking representative looked up from her conversation with Miguel and smiled with recognition. Ms. Rodriguez, thank you for coming. I'm Jennifer Walsh from First National. We spoke on the phone. Thank you for responding so quickly, Jennifer. I appreciate your diligence in protecting our business accounts. Marcus stared at us with growing confusion. Sarah, what is this woman talking about? Why is she calling you Rodriguez, like you're somebody important? Jennifer consulted her tablet. Mr. Marcus Rodriguez, I presume? You're listed in our system as an authorized employee for transaction processing, but not as an account holder or business owner. The account belongs entirely to Sarah Rodriguez, operating under the business entity Riverside Holdings LLC. The remaining customers had stopped pretending to eat and were openly watching our conversation. Mrs. Chen's book club had their phones out, probably texting their families about the drama unfolding at their usual lunch spot. That's impossible, Marcus said, his voice getting louder. This is a family restaurant. Our parents set this up. Sarah works in the kitchen. According to our records, Jennifer continued professionally. Ms. Sarah Rodriguez purchased Milano's restaurant 3 years ago through her LLC. She holds the business license, the liquor license, the lease agreements, and all operational accounts. You were added as an authorized general manager 8 months ago, with limited transaction privileges. I watched Marcus process this information. His face cycled through confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally, a dawning understanding of how badly he'd miscalculated. But, you don't know anything about business, he said to me, his voice smaller now. You work in the kitchen. I work everywhere, I replied. Because I own everything. Jennifer pulled out a document folder. I brought copies of the account agreements and business registration paperwork, since there seemed to be some confusion about authority levels. Ms. Rodriguez, you'll need to review the unauthorized access attempts and decide how you'd like to proceed. She handed me the folder and I glanced through the papers. Marcus had tried to access not just the daily receipts, but also our line of credit, vendor payment accounts, and payroll systems. If he'd succeeded, he could have done serious damage to our financial stability. Jennifer, I said, I think we need to make some changes to the authorized user list. Marcus stepped forward, panic clear in his voice now. Sir, wait. Let's talk about this privately. There's been a misunderstanding. The misunderstanding, I replied, was thinking you could fire me from my own restaurant. I turned to address the remaining customers, who deserved an explanation for the chaos they'd witnessed. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption to your lunch. My name is Sarah Rodriguez and I'm the owner of Milano's. We've had some internal staffing issues that are being resolved. Miguel, our head server, will make sure everyone's meal is complimentary today, and I hope you'll give us another chance to provide the peaceful dining experience you come here for. Mrs. Chin raised her hand like she was in a classroom. Honey, are you the one who changed the menu 2 years ago to include those wonderful vegetarian options? Yes, ma'am. We wanted to make sure everyone in the community felt welcome here. And you're the one who stayed open during that snowstorm last winter so the construction workers could have somewhere warm to eat lunch? That's right. She nodded approvingly. Then you keep doing what you're doing. That young man's behavior was completely inappropriate. The construction crew leader from the corner table stood up. We've been coming here for 3 years. Food's been great, service is always good. We don't care about your family drama, but we do care about being treated with respect when we're trying to eat our lunch. Other customers murmured agreement. These were people who'd supported Milano's through our growth from struggling restaurant to neighborhood institution. They'd watched me expedite their orders, remembered their preferences, asked about their families. To them, I wasn't the family disappointment. I was the person who made their lunch hour a little better every day. Marcus stood in the middle of the dining room, his public display of authority having backfired completely. The confident speech about hiring qualified staff and running a real business now looked like exactly what it was, an uninformed power grab by someone who'd fundamentally misunderstood the situation. Ms. Rodriguez, Jennifer said, what would you like me to update in our system regarding Mr. Marcus Rodriguez's access levels? I looked at my brother who was staring at the floor with the deflated posture of someone whose entire worldview had just collapsed. Remove him from all accounts, effective immediately, I said. And Jennifer? Thank you for protecting my business. Your diligence probably prevented some serious financial damage. She nodded and made notes on her tablet. We'll process these changes within the hour. Mr. Marcus Rodriguez, you'll need to return any business credit cards, account access codes, or financial documents in your possession. Marcus looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not dismissal, but genuine recognition that he'd made a catastrophic error in judgment. Sarah, he said quietly, I didn't know. Our parents said. Our parents said what they always say, I interrupted. That I'm the family disappointment who needs help from her successful brother. What they didn't know is that I bought this place 3 years ago when it was failing, turned it into a profitable business and created jobs for 15 people including you. The dining room remained silent, our family drama playing out in front of people who just wanted to eat their lunch in peace. I gave you a management position because family is important to me, I continued. I trusted you with significant responsibility and hoped you'd use it to learn the business, maybe eventually become a real partner. Instead, you used it to publicly humiliate me based on assumptions that were completely wrong. Marcus's shoulders sagged. What happens now? I looked around the dining room at Miguel waiting to clean up this mess, at Mrs. Chen's book club watching with fascinated concern, at the construction crew who'd lost part of their lunch break to family drama, at the business lunch table where people were checking their watches and clearly regretting their restaurant choice. Now you clean out your office, return all business materials, and think about whether public humiliation is really the best management strategy, I said. And I get back to work running my restaurant. Jennifer finished her paperwork and shook my hand. Ms. Rodriguez, we appreciate your business and apologize for the inconvenience. If you need any assistance with the account security updates, please don't hesitate to call. After she left, Marcus stood in the middle of the dining room looking lost. The confident general manager who'd fired me 30 minutes ago had been replaced by someone who clearly had no idea what to do next. Sarah, he said, I'm sorry. I really thought. I know what you thought, I replied. The same thing our whole family thinks. That success looks like an MBA and a corporate title, not like someone who quietly builds something from nothing. The problem is, you never bothered to find out what was actually happening here before you decided to take control. Miguel approached cautiously. Boss, what do you need me to do? Make sure everyone gets taken care of, I said, tying my apron back on. And let the kitchen staff know that the drama is over. We still have a restaurant to run. As I walked back toward the kitchen, Marcus called after me. What should I tell our parents? I stopped and turned around. Tell them that their family disappointment owns a successful restaurant, employs 15 people, and just learned an important lesson about making assumptions. And Marcus, next time someone gives you a job, maybe try to understand the business before you decide to take it over. The lunch rush resumed its normal rhythm, though with an undercurrent of excited conversation about what customers had just witnessed. Mrs. Chen's book club was already planning to come back next week specifically to support the restaurant after the family drama. The construction crew left their usual generous tip and promised to spread the word that Milano's was still the best lunch spot in the neighborhood. By the time the afternoon shift arrived, Marcus had quietly cleaned out his office and left. Miguel found his keys and access cards on the desk, along with a handwritten note that simply said, "I'm sorry." That evening, as I closed up the restaurant I'd built from nothing, I reflected on the day's events. Marcus's public firing hadn't just been about asserting authority. It had been about a fundamental misunderstanding of who I was and what I was capable of achieving. Our family had always seen me as the one who needed help, not the one providing it. But Milano's success wasn't an accident or a lucky break. It was the result of 3 years of careful planning, hard work, financial risk-taking, and relationship building. The customers who defended me during Marcus's meltdown understood that, even if my own family didn't. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Marcus. Can we talk tomorrow? I think I have a lot to learn." I smiled and put the phone away. Tomorrow we could talk about lessons learned and whether second chances were possible. Tonight I had a successful restaurant to close up and plans to make for continued growth. Sometimes the family disappointment turns out to be the family success story. It just takes the right moment for everyone else to notice.